became the people who were defending casinos. We became the people who seemed to be defending post office closures. And it was like we lost sight of the sense that these were part of the crucial social bonds of community. We talked about the benefits of a flexible and mobile labour force, but we didn't think enough about its impact on weakening social bonds and squeezing time with your family. So people began to see a government which looked remote from what they cared about. They could see a government doing things they agreed with or disagreed with, but not a political movement that spoke to our values. To change, we need to look critically at our traditions and why they led us to this point. And this is where I come to the Fabians. Among the many strands of the British Labour tradition, two have proved particularly influential. The first was the idea of socialism as a kind of missionary work to be undertaken on behalf of people. I don't want to give the Fabians a hard time genuinely, but this view is most obviously associated with Sidney and Beatrice Webb. There is an alternative strand represented by the cooperative movement and the early trade unions, which saw labour as a grassroots democratic movement to enable people to lead the most fulfilling lives. Now, I think it's really important to say this. The Webb tradition, the Webb-Fabian tradition, was born of an era where the challenge of the left was meeting people's basic needs for health, housing, education, and relief from poverty. That need is always going to remain. But actually, we can be more ambitious as a movement in the 21st century than we were in the 20th. Equally, the new labour tradition, which embraced dynamic markets, is important for our future and creating wealth. But people, as I said, don't just care about the bottom line. There is so much more to life. So, my argument is that the bureaucratic state and the overbearing market will not meet our real ambition as a political party. That each citizen can be liberated to have the real freedom to shape their own lives. To do that, we need to draw on that other tradition, based on mutualism, localism, and the common bonds of solidarity that captures the essence of our party at its best. The belief in those common bonds means we should also be defenders of the things that people value and which are threatened, sometimes by the market, sometimes by government. So take an example. When we say we care about Sure Start, it's not simply because Sure Start delivers a good educational service to people. It's because it's the site, the place at which people meet and form a sense of bond and community. The same is true of local libraries. And the same is true of ways of life which are deeply ingrained in our country and which we should understand. Just before Christmas, believe it or not, I went with John Connors to Billingsgate Fish Market, not to buy fish for Christmas, but to talk to the porters there whose way of life is under threat, they feel, by changes that the Corporation of London are planning. And I met a guy there who said to me that the best day of his life was when he got his porter's badge. And every day since then, there hasn't been a day when he's woken up not feeling proud about the job he does. Now, a view that says that the market should be given free rein doesn't give sufficient respect to that tradition and that idea and what he feels. And that's one of the lessons that we need to learn. We should seek to defend ways of life which give people a sense of self-respect. And talking of respect and decency, you can't build a sense of respect and decency in our country if there are people at the top who apparently feel no obligation to the rest of society. That is why what has been happening at Britain's banks and continues to happen is such a scandal. It's not simply about the fact that there was the bailout and that they are reliant on state money. It's actually about a deeper sense about what some of the bankers are expressing, that they have no social obligation to the rest of society. It's enough to say, I'll just take what the market will pay me, thank you very much. But that isn't how you build the society I believe in. It's got to be based on a much deeper sense of social obligation. I care about the success of our financial services, about the jobs it creates. But today, when you see some of our leading bankers constantly threatening to leave the country, trying to hold the country to ransom, and thinking only of themselves, it makes me angry. And it makes me even more angry that this government is failing to act on the scandal that we continue to see in our banking industry as well. So So we need to draw on values that lie deep in our traditions, but we also need to reach out beyond our traditions as well. One of our tasks is to learn the lesson of the green movement and put sustainability at the heart of what we do. And another is to draw on the tradition of liberty. Progressive politics is not just about meeting economic and social needs. These are only ever a means to human flourishing and freedom. Part of it is about upholding the liberty of the person as well. Nobody should pretend there are important and difficult choices to be made about the balance between liberty and security. But we didn't take the need to uphold liberty seriously enough. In recent months, we have started to change, and we've shown our willingness to support the reduction of 28-day detention to 14 days. I am determined we take liberty seriously as part of the governing philosophy of this party. So we need to change the way we approach the economy and change the way we think about our values. But thirdly also, we have to reform our approach to politics as well. Let me be clear with you. I think not since the days of the rotten boroughs has politics and the political system been in such disrepute. If you look at declining turnout, shrinking electoral rolls, anger over broken promises, people have lost trust in politics. The most depressing thing for me when I knock on the door is actually not when people say they're voting for somebody else. That's depressing enough. But it's when people say, as so many people do, you're all the same. It's not going to make any difference to me voting for any of you. And actually the irony of Nick Clegg's broken promises and David Cameron's broken promises is it undermines trust in politics more widely, not just in them. Now, what are the roots of this crisis? It's a crisis of unreformed institutions, broken promises, remote political parties, and I also believe a knee-jerk adversarial political culture. Part of the problem has been the failure of all parties to honour repeated promises to usher in a new politics. That's why we've got to reform our political institutions. Let's be honest, our own credibility was undermined by our failure to honour our manifesto commitment on electoral reform and by the long-running saga of reform of the House of Lords. We will take every opportunity to reform the way our political system works. That's why I'll be campaigning for the alternative vote in the referendum, and I'll keep my promise to do it. But also, this audience knows, from the work you do outside this room, that very few people on the doorstep tend to ask about the alternative vote or the reform of the House of Lords. They think the reason politics is discredited is because politicians always break their promises, as I said. That's why we've got to be the people who under-promise and over-deliver. And I don't just mean in terms of the pledges we make, I also mean in terms of the rhetoric we use. And this is very tricky, but it's very important. Because if you promise people a transformation in their lives and then don't deliver it, it's no wonder that people get cynical about politics and what it can deliver to them. But that is just part of the story about how we renew our politics. Think back to our early days as a political party. I'm not saying you all remember it. Of course we fought elections, but we did a lot more than that. We were part of the fabric of community life through our wider movement, not just the trade unions, but the cooperative movement. Now, nostalgia for times past is not an answer to the challenge of the future. But this is the challenge for all of us, which is to be a genuine movement for change, appropriate to our time, up and down the country. We've got people here from London Citizens today. People know about London Citizens and the work they do, not just on the living wage, but on a whole range of issues. We've got to learn the lessons. I think they deserve a round of applause. We've got to learn their lessons. We're a political party, not the same as London Citizens. But we've got to be the best community organisation movement in the country. Because it's the only way we rebuild the case for politics from the ground up. The campaign for the local library, the local zebra crossing, the improvement of the school must be our campaign. And not just a campaign for the state to do things, but campaigns that achieve things in themselves. There's one other thing we need to change in our politics. No party has a monopoly of wisdom or virtue, and it is foolish to pretend that they do. I think the decision of the Liberal Democrats to join a Conservative-led government was a tragic mistake. Yes. And I hope they come to see that in time. Forgive me if I decline to join in this gloating at the expense of the Liberal Democrats, because actually their mistake means they are part of a government attempting to shift politics to the right in Britain. I'm certainly pleased that many Liberal Democrats now see Labour as the main vehicle for their hopes in the future. Thousands of former Liberal Democrat voters and supporters, voters and members have joined us since the election. I want them to find a welcome home in our party, not just making up the numbers, but contributing actively to the strengthening of our values and the renewal of our policies. But equally, there are many Liberal Democrats who have decided to stay and fight for the progressive soul of their party. Most of them do not want to see their traditions sacrificed for personal ambition. I respect their choice too, and I understand how painful it is and must be for them to watch what is happening to their party. We do not doubt that they hold sincere views, and we will cooperate in Parliament and outside it to fight with them against the direction of this government. In fact, it is our duty to work with progressives everywhere we can against what this government is doing. So this is the way I believe we need to seize the mantle of progressive politics and shape the economic, ideological and political landscape of the future. It is about building a fair economy and learning the lessons of neoliberalism and what it has done to parts of our country. It is about rooting our values and traditions and ideas that go beyond the bureaucratic state and the overbearing market, and learning from life the lessons of Fabianism and the need to go beyond it. And it is about a different kind of politics and learning lessons of tribalism, and sometimes the need to go beyond that too. The prize, in my view, is not simply a Labour government. It is a lot more than that. And this is my conclusion, final thought to you. You see, I think that when we think about what we want to achieve as a political party and as a group of progressives, it's not simply about the policies that we implement, important though that is. It's not simply about getting back into government, important though that is. It is actually, and this is what the Conservatives set out to do in the 1970s, it is actually about changing the common sense of the age and influencing the common sense of the age. It's influencing people's values up and down this country so that they share our progressive ends. Now I think, and this is my point of optimism, I think there is a progressive majority in this country. I think that was illustrated at the general election. But we need to become its standard bearer, and we've got work to do. But I also think the way we do that, not just over the coming years, but the way we sustain ourselves in government, is crucially as a genuine movement. Because if you are to avoid being a party that just governs for a bit and then gets chucked out, and then finds that you've got an ideological fight on your hands against the direction of the country, you've got to embed your values in people in every street, in every neighbourhood in this country. And you just can't do that simply from Westminster or Whitehall. Now, the Conservatives have their newspapers, which helps them to do that. And our best hope is people and a movement. And that's why this idea, this ambition about how we become a genuine community organising movement is so important. Because that is the way we influence people to make our values the common sense of the age. I approach this task with a profound sense of optimism. Because whatever this government is doing to our country, I don't think it's in tune with the values of the British people. And I think if we are willing to change, if we are willing to understand the lessons of history, if we are willing to look critically at ourselves, we can not only win the next general election, but we can shape a politics and a country that we can be proud of and that is true to our values of equality, social justice and fairness. Thank you very much.